This video is about how to overcome infertility. Now, it's a battle to overcome infertility, and the reason why is because it has become big, big, big business. How big of the business is it? Or how big of a business is it? Well, you can see here back in, in 2017, we're told that it's about a $7 billion industry. Here you can see the in vitro fertilization market size. They estimate up to $37 billion by 2027. And we even have a bigger number estimated for 2026. You can see 41 billion right up there, 41 billion by 2026. So what's the title? Fertility clinics are being taken over by for-profit companies selling false hope. So this comes out of NBC News. So what are some simple things that we can learn about when it comes to fertility? Well, this, you can see what I put into the Google search field, low-fat diet and infertility. And the reason why I did this is because several years ago I came across a paper, and it's really interesting because when you think about what everyone is told to do, eat low-fat dairy foods. High fat is bad. Eat low-fat dairy foods. So this is coming from Medical News Today. Back on this actually would probably the year I got this original paper. So what are we told? Intake of low-fat dairy foods may increase the risk of infertility, whereas intake of high-fat dairy foods may decrease the risk of infertility. So the problem with this is that you don't want to look at fertility or any other health issue based upon a single calorie source, being low fat or high fat. But what we should really look at here is the issue of just fat in general in the diet. And everyone has been scared away from eating fatty foods. So what do people do? Well, people overeat sugar and flour foods to the point that the average American consumes shockingly 40% of their total calories from refined sugar and refined flour calories. And of course, those are dessert type foods and snacks, and they're of course mixed with typically omega-6 rich oils, peanut, sunflower, safflower, corn oil. So when it comes to food, to fat and understanding fat, my suggestion would be to check out the 50 pages I wrote on fat in the D-Flame diet, because you should understand the difference between polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, and saturated fatty acids and understand their basic functions. So I'm not going to go through all of that now, but what I can tell you clearly is that if you look at this would be a cell, and the cell has this outer part is called a cell membrane, and it is mostly lipid, meaning fat. So it'll be fatty acids and cholesterol makes up all of our cell membranes. So we got however many trillions of cells we have, every single one of them is surrounded by fat. And so the healthiest fats would be your omega-3 polyunsaturated and your monounsaturated. And believe it or not, saturated fatty acids are not unhealthy. They become problematic when we eat too much flour and sugar, and what happens then when we overeat these calories, which is what the average American does, is these sugar and flour calories are actually converted into saturated fatty acids and cholesterol. So that's a little bit of information that you can read in the 50 pages of fats in this book. So when you start talking about infertility, the information is not that much different than what one could talk about if you're looking at, for example, the COVID situation. So I'm going to highlight a bunch of videos here. You can see all these videos. They are about obesity. They're all about obesity. So why is obesity such an issue? Well, the reason why is because there is a relationship between obesity and infertility. So you can see, we'll start with the men, obesity and male infertility. And we can see right here, look at this right here. This is from 2015. Increased body weight in men and they're talking about fat there, not muscle, has been associated with lower testosterone level, poor sperm quality, and reduced fertility compared to men of normal weight. So now there are always outlier problematic scenarios for men and women when it comes to fertility, but the biggest issue is obesity. That is the biggest issue. So people may argue, well, I know a lot of obese people and they had healthy kids, and that of course is true. So what is the issue about obesity? Well, you can see right here, this was from back in, I forget what year it was, I didn't put the date in there, but you can see the title, Serum Insulin and Inflammatory Markers in Overweight Individuals with and Without Dyslipidemia. So how should we look at obesity? This is a really great conclusion. That's very, very illuminating. Identification of people solely on the basis of an elevated plasma triglyceride and low HDL cholesterol uncovers an overweight group of people who have a generalized metabolic disorder. This is a pro-inflammatory state. So as people move from being normal weight to obese, there is a gradual transformation that occurs. And many obese people do not reach a pro-inflammatory state as fast as other people do. So in contrast, overweight people with normal plasma lipids have normal glucose, have normal insulin metabolism, and have low inflammatory markers and normal blood pressure. So those people will be far more likely to be fertile and to be able to have children. So when you start to look at the overweight issue, it is no different than when it comes to our current immune health crisis called COVID-19. So this is the cover of my new book, The Deflame Diet for Immune Health. And there are some obese people who have zero symptoms, feel fine, don't shed more viruses, don't get infected, they're hardly contagious, compared to obese flamers who shed 100% more viruses than lean or metabolically lean individuals. So when you look at every condition out there, save for the outlier scenarios, which people like to focus on, I don't know why, we always see the obese, hyperglycemic, pro-inflammatory state being a key issue. So here's another image of this progression that occurs. So this was published in 2011, Journal of Clinical Investigation, extremely well-respected journal. And you can see what happens as we go from non-diabetic normal glycemia. Over here you can see insulin-resistant, hyperinsulinemic, and hyperglycemic. So you can see the process. Normal. This guy here is overweight but metabolically normal, and this guy is metabolically pro-inflammatory. So if you're looking at COVID risk, this guy is at risk of dying. This guy is not. If you're looking at risk for being infertile, this guy is likely to be infertile, and this guy is not. Now people say, I know a lot of lean people who are too. Well, those are outliers, and I'm not talking about those outliers in this video. So we have to understand that as people progress from being skinny when they're young to obese when they're old, at some point in this process, and it can be different for different people, like for example, someone at stage 6, they can be normal or they can be pro-inflammatory. They can look exactly the same, physically the same. However, one person is infertile and one person is not. And this is why you need to track the markers I just mentioned before. Glucose, fasting glucose, postprandial glucose, hemoglobin A1C, fasting triglycerides, HDL cholesterol. Those are very, very helpful markers to see who is going to be pro-inflammatory, and of course looking at C-reactive protein. So lots of research has been done on this. Look at this, the impact of obesity on male fertility, sperm function, and molecular composition. From this article, there is emerging evidence that male obesity negatively impacts fertility through changes to hormone levels as well as direct changes to sperm function and sperm molecular composition. Horrific, horrific. So what else do we know? This is, you can read the whole thing, you can pause it if you want, but look at this. Both male and female offspring born to fathers with suboptimal nutrition, which means obese in the context of this article. Now you can be malnourished and the same thing could happen, but most people are not skinny and malnourished, they are obese. and nutritionally deprived in many ways, of course. So both male and female offspring born to fathers with suboptimal nutrition and obesity in this context have a constellation of metabolic and reproductive health pathologies. So unhealthy, obese fathers and mothers will transmit pro-inflammatory metabolic states and challenges to their offspring's reproductive health. All we got to do is get our body fat down to a level where all the markers I just mentioned previously were normal. People think, so we'll go backwards here real quick, because people think, well, if you're sitting here or here, these people think, well, I can never get back to being healthy like this guy. Well, you probably don't have to. More than likely, you can go from an 8 or a 9 and get down to a 6 or a 5. And then you would likely be way less inclined to have a bad COVID reaction, to have a bad influenza reaction, to develop heart disease, cancer, and of course, in the context of this video, much more likely to be fertile. So what other motivation is there for guys? This is a paper. Funny enough, notice the head author, Dr. Wang, talking about low T. So low testosterone associated with obesity, metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome markers are, mentioned them before, fasting glucose, fasting triglycerides, fasting HDL cholesterol, waist circumference, and blood pressure. Those are the 3 markers of the metabolic syndrome. And most obese people at some point will enter that stage, and then all problems start to manifest. So low testosterone, you don't want to be running around with low T, gentlemen. That basically means that you're metabolically feminized. Well, how does that work? It's from this article, this picture. So here's testosterone deficiency. The cells that produce testosterone are called Leydig cells. Now notice what happens here. We have 2 ways to screw up Leydig cell function. So we reduce Leydig cell function, and that means we will end up producing less testosterone. Here you go. Big belly, visceral fat. What's the outcome? High pro-inflammatory cytokines, elevated glycemia, elevated insulin, elevated leptin. What is the outcome? These 4 factors are going to inhibit testosterone function. Men who become metabolically feminized like this and develop low testosterone, they tend to have elevated estrogen levels. Aromatase is an enzyme involved in estrogen production. So when men develop elevated estrogen levels, look at what happens. We get inhibition of the hypothalamus, and then of course that reduces the gonadotropic releasing hormones and luteinizing hormones that are needed for producing testosterone in Leydig cells. So there are 2 ways that we develop low testosterone, and so what do guys have to do? Got to get your body weight down to where your inflammatory markers are normal. Very, very simple, very straightforward, very uncomplicated, and it won't cost. It'll actually save you money. You'll just be buying less crappy food. You can go to Aldi's and get organic vegetation and organic meat even. I mean, it's so easy to do. One of the earliest videos I did back in, what year would that have been? 2016, was on how to do the deflame diet at Aldi's and how to do the deflame diet even at Five Guys. So you should check those videos out that were done. You just go right to the deflame. Well, you're on it right now. Just click on the deflame nutrition image and you can go right and click videos and go right down to the very bottom. What about ladies? Well, same thing. Obesity induces ovarian inflammation and reduces egg oocyte, means egg quality. Straightforward, just like the guys, same problem. Earlier publication, metabolic syndrome, as I mentioned before, which is what? High glucose, high triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol, waist circumference because of body fat, and elevated blood pressure. You just need 3 of the 5 of those to be considered to have the metabolic syndrome. And when we have this scenario, what is the outcome? Well, the outcome is poor egg quality. So from this article, look what they show us here. So a study exploring the differences in the preovulatory follicular environment of obese women. What did they find? They found women with higher body mass index due to excess body fat have increased levels of insulin, increased lactic acid, increased triglycerides, and increased C-reactive protein in the follicular fluid where eggs are found. This increase of CRP in the follicular fluid of obese women is particularly of concern because it might indicate inflammation. It doesn't might, it does indicate inflammation and increased free radical activity, which will impede the development of the eggs. So now you take a combination of the father who was pro-inflammatory, obese, and the mother, and now you have a fertility crisis. So very simple. What do? Get rid of the big bellies, get rid of the visceral body fat. Very, very, very easy to do. Very easy to do. So in previous videos, I have shown this slide. The best way to survive the flu, COVID-19, and any other virus is to do what? Get your weight normal, get your glucose levels normal, get your vitamin D normal, take key supplements. And the obvious way to get your weight normal is to replace refined food calories with vegetation. Very straightforward, very simple. The exact same recommendation would be applied. So let's just say that you're worried about COVID. These would be the 3 books that I have written that would be useful to you. But if you're worried about fertility, look at what we do. Just take out the immune book and do the exact same thing. Get your weight normal, get your glucose levels normal, get your vitamin D level normal, take key supplements, and replace refined food calories with vegetation. How easy is that? And this is a key book because it'll train your brain, or it'll teach your mind how to overcome the problems we have to deal with when it comes to dealing with body weight. So why, this book will explain to you why your brain, body physiology, emotions, and primordial drives want you fat and what you can do about it. So if you like this information, you want to score these books, you can go right to my Amazon section. You got the 5 books sitting right there. And if you want volume discounts, you can go right to dflame.com. Notice right here, all of them have volume discounts available. Of course, you can also, if you're just listening for this for the first time, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and also go to the D-Flame Nutrition Facebook page and like it, where I post regular updates.